There's a moment we all face, one we never talk about but feel deeply every single time it happens. That split second in a heated argument when your chest tightens, your mind races, and your emotions rush to take control. That's the moment where most people lose themselves. That's the moment where relationships break, respect gets damaged, and words are spoken that can't be taken back. But what if I told you that everything could change with just 3 seconds? 3 seconds that can save you from regret. 3 seconds that can stop an argument from exploding. 3 seconds that can turn chaos into clarity and tension into understanding. Today, you're about to learn a rule that doesn't just transform conversations, it transforms you. A rule that gives you emotional power, not emotional pressure. A rule that separates people who react from people who lead. So stay with me, because what you're about to hear isn't just advice, it's a skill that can change the way you communicate for the rest of your life. And once you master it, arguments won't control you anymore. You will control the moment. Let's begin. Pause before reacting is more than a communication tactic. It is a form of self-leadership, a discipline that separates people who are controlled by their emotions from people who control their emotions. In the heat of an argument, your brain gets flooded with adrenaline, cortisol, and the instinct to attack or defend. That biological reaction is fast, automatic, and usually destructive. When someone raises their voice at you or throws a harsh comment your way, your mind wants to fire back instantly. But that instant reaction is the trap. That's where relationships get damaged, respect gets lost, and small disagreements turn into chaos. The power of the 3-second pause is that it interrupts that automatic behavior and gives you back the steering wheel. In those 3 seconds you take a breath, the emotional fog starts to lift. Your brain shifts from the primitive part that reacts to danger into the rational part that analyzes the situation. You begin to see the difference between what you feel like saying and what you should say. That moment is small, but it changes everything. People think emotional control means shutting down your feelings or pretending not to care, but real control is choosing not to let your first impulse represent you. You are still feeling everything fully, you are just deciding not to let those feelings run the conversation. When you pause before reacting, you're doing something most people never practice. You're giving yourself space to respond with intention instead of instinct. You're acknowledging that the other person's tone, words, or frustration do not have the power to dictate your behavior unless you hand that power over. This short pause creates a mental buffer between what happened and what you decide to do next. It allows you to ask yourself a quiet internal question. What outcome do I actually want here? And that question is impossible to ask when you're reacting instantly. The truth is, arguments escalate not because the problem is big, but because the reactions are fast. One sharp response triggers another. Pride meets pride, ego answers ego. But when you pause, you break the chain. You halt the momentum that normally pushes the conversation off the cliff. That pause communicates confidence, not weakness. It shows that you are not threatened by intensity and that you are capable of choosing maturity over impulse. The person you're talking to might actually soften because your calmness removes the fuel from the fire. Pausing isn't about silence, it's about control. It's about reminding yourself that you are not here to win every point. You are here to protect your peace, your clarity, and your standard of communication. That pause tells your nervous system to slow down, your breathing to stabilize, and your mind to focus. It turns the argument into something manageable instead of something explosive. It makes you the emotional anchor in the room instead of another storm. This is powerful because it gives you the ability to rewrite the entire direction of a conflict. 3 seconds can save you from saying words you'll regret, from escalating situations that didn't need to become battles, and from losing control of who you want to be in that moment. 3 seconds give you the chance to respond like the strongest version of yourself, not the most reactive one. Regain emotional control is the heart of why the 3-second rule works. When an argument becomes heated, your emotions rise faster than your ability to think. Your body goes into a survival like state, your heartbeat increases, your breathing shortens, your muscles tense, and your mind jumps into defense mode. In that state, you are not thinking to understand, you are thinking to protect yourself, even if there is no real threat. That's why you say things you never meant, raise your tone without noticing, or interpret every word as an attack. You are reacting from a place of emotional overload, not emotional awareness. But the 3-second pause helps you interrupt that emotional wave before it drags you under. In those seconds, your nervous system starts to settle. Your brain gets a chance to shift away from the fight or flight response and access the part capable of logic, empathy, and restraint. It's not about suppressing your emotions, it's about slowing them down long enough to understand what's actually happening. You begin to separate the moment from your trigger. Instead of responding from your wound, You respond from your wisdom. You no longer feel the urgent need to defend your pride or respond to every sharp tone. You gain space to ask yourself, is this situation really as big as it feels right now? And more importantly, do I want this conversation to go where my emotions are trying to push it? Regaining emotional control is reclaiming your power. When your emotions own you, anyone can manipulate you by simply raising their voice or saying something hurtful. But when you control your emotions, no one can drag you into a reaction you didn't choose. You are no longer controlled by their energy. You are guided by your own intention. You become the calm center of the storm instead of another force adding to the chaos. And that calmness doesn't mean you're being passive or letting someone disrespect you. It means you're choosing self-respect over emotional chaos, clarity over confusion, and outcome over impulse. When you regain emotional control, your presence becomes stronger. People listen differently. The argument itself changes shape. What was once loud becomes manageable. What felt personal becomes clearer. What seemed impossible becomes solvable. Emotional control doesn't remove conflict, but it removes the unnecessary damage caused by uncontrolled reactions. It creates a moment where you can respond with confidence instead of panic. You can express your thoughts more clearly because you're not speaking from adrenaline. You can set boundaries more effectively because you're grounded in your values, not your anxiety. You can hear the other person more accurately because your mind isn't occupied with the next defensive comeback. This thing matters because so many arguments are lost not due to the problem itself, but because someone lost control first. The goal is not to be emotionless. The goal is to be emotionally intelligent. It's to understand your triggers, own your reactions, and choose your behavior with intention. Those 3 seconds give you the most valuable thing you can have in a heated moment. The ability to respond like the person you want to be, not the person the argument is trying to turn you into. Shift from defending to understanding is the moment where the entire argument transforms. Most people don't argue to communicate, they argue to protect their pride. When someone criticizes you, raises their voice, or says something unfair, your mind instantly jumps into defense mode. You feel the need to justify yourself, explain your intentions, or prove the other person wrong. But defending doesn't calm the argument. It actually inflames it because both people end up fighting to be heard, and no one is actually listening. The 3-second pause creates enough space for you to shift your mindset from, how do I protect myself right now? To, what is actually happening here? And what do they really mean? That shift is the beginning of real maturity, and it changes the emotional temperature instantly. When you stop defending and start understanding, you open a door that most arguments never reach. You begin to look beyond the words being thrown at you and search for the emotion behind them. Maybe the person isn't angry with you, they're hurt, insecure, or overwhelmed. Maybe their tone isn't disrespect, it's frustration with themselves, their day, or something that has nothing to do with you. When you give yourself 3 seconds to pause, you give yourself the chance to hear the meaning, not just the noise. And when you understand the meaning, your reaction becomes calmer, wiser, and more effective. Shifting from defending to understanding doesn't mean you're agreeing with the other person or accepting disrespect. It means you're choosing clarity over ego. You're choosing to respond with intention instead of being dragged into an emotional battlefield. You're choosing to look at the conversation from a higher perspective instead of getting lost in the heat of the moment. And the remarkable thing is, once you make that shift, the other person often follows. Arguments usually escalate because both sides feel unheard. The moment one person truly tries to understand, the tension starts to drop because someone is finally breaking the cycle. When you approach the conversation with genuine curiosity instead of defensiveness, it changes the dynamic completely. You can ask questions instead of attacking. You can clarify instead of assuming. You can express how you feel without needing to win. Understanding gives you control of the moment because you're no longer reacting to every emotional wave. You're analyzing, processing, and choosing your response based on what moves the conversation forward rather than what satisfies your ego in the moment. This shift is powerful because it shows emotional leadership. Anyone can argue. Anyone can defend. Anyone can raise their voice. But the person who chooses to understand is the one who actually influences the outcome. They set the tone. They set the pace. They set the emotional standard. And when you do this consistently, people begin to communicate with you differently because they know you won't meet chaos with chaos. They know you'll bring clarity, not fire. It turns arguments into conversations and conflict into connection. It teaches you to prioritize the relationship over the reaction, the long-term peace over the short-term win. It turns you from someone who reacts to feelings into someone who understands them. And in the middle of emotional conflict, understanding is the most powerful form of strength you can carry. De-escalate the argument is where your calm becomes the strongest tool in the entire interaction. Arguments don't explode because the issue is unsolvable. They explode because emotions keep feeding each other like dry wood feeding a fire. One raised voice triggers another. One defensive sentence creates another. One sarcastic tone invites another. And suddenly, a small misunderstanding turns into a full emotional storm. De-escalation is not about being silent or avoiding the issue. It's about removing the heat so the truth can actually be talked about. And the 3-second rule gives you that ability in a way that feels natural and powerful. When you pause for 3 seconds, you interrupt the emotional momentum. Arguments rely on speed. They rely on quick reactions, loud responses, and unfiltered words. But when you slow down the rhythm, even slightly, the entire dynamic shifts. Your pause acts like a reset button. It sends a subtle signal to your brain, the other person, and the conversation itself that things are not going to spin out of control. This helps both sides step out of their emotional surge and into a space where communication is possible again. People often mirror the emotional tone given to them. So when you slow down, breathe, and respond intentionally, the other person subconsciously starts to match that energy. De-escalation is also about the message your behavior sends. When you stay calm, you're showing that the argument doesn't own you. You're showing that you care more about clarity than chaos. You're showing that the issue is important enough to handle with respect, not aggression. Very often, the person in front of you isn't really mad at you. They're mad at how they feel in the moment. They're overwhelmed, misunderstood, or emotionally flooded. Your calmness gives them a sense of safety. It allows them to settle enough to express what's really going on instead of attacking you out of frustration. Your composure becomes a space where their emotions can land without being bounced back with more intensity. The 3-second pause also gives you the power to prevent damage. Most people regret what they say in the middle of an argument, not after it. Harsh words thrown in anger can feel permanent even when they were never intended. But when you take that pause, you protect yourself from saying things you'll have to apologize for later. You protect the relationship from unnecessary wounds. You protect the conversation from spiraling into a place where both sides feel hurt, unheard, or disrespected. That pause becomes a filter where your intentions stay clean and your message stays clear. De-escalation doesn't mean losing the argument. It means refusing to let the argument lose you. It's not weakness, it's strength in its most disciplined form. Anyone can raise their voice. Anyone can let their emotions explode. But very few people can choose composure when everything inside them wants to react. That's emotional leadership. When you de-escalate, you turn conflict into something productive. You create an environment where solutions can actually surface, where apologies can be heard, where feelings can be understood instead of weaponized. You shift the energy from fighting to resolving, from reacting to communicating, from chaos to clarity. And that shift is often all it takes to turn a heated argument into a meaningful conversation. Led with maturity, not emotion, is the ultimate demonstration of self-respect and emotional intelligence during conflict. In every heated argument, there's a split-second moment where you get to choose who is in charge. Your emotions are your maturity. Emotions are immediate, impulsive, and often fueled by fear or pride. Maturity is intentional, steady, and focused on the bigger picture. When you lead with emotion, you react without thinking. You say things you don't mean, you assume the worst, and you let the moment control your behavior. But when you lead with maturity, you become the stabilizing force in the conversation, the one who decides how the interaction unfolds instead of letting the argument dictate everything. Leading with maturity means you understand that not every comment deserves a reaction and not every tone is an attack. It's knowing that if you match someone's anger with your own, the situation will only escalate. But if you bring calm clarity, you shift the entire dynamic. Maturity isn't about being quiet or passive. It's about responding with intention instead of impulse. It's about choosing the version of yourself you won't regret later. When you pause for those 3 seconds, you're giving your maturity enough time to catch up to your emotions. You're reminding yourself that you are responsible for your response, no matter how chaotic the moment feels. This way of leading teaches people how to communicate with you. When you consistently show composure, others quickly realize that yelling, blaming, or provoking won't get a reaction from you. They learn that the conversation must meet you at the level of respect and clarity you maintain. That's powerful because it sets a standard without you ever having to declare one. It shows that your emotions cannot be used as a tool against you. It shows that you're not someone who loses control when things get heated. And it shows that you value the health of the relationship more than the temporary satisfaction of being right. Leading with maturity builds trust, both in others and within yourself. People feel safer communicating with you because they know the conversation won't turn into a battlefield. They know you will listen, think, and respond with purpose. And you begin to trust yourself more too. You begin to believe in your ability to stay grounded under pressure. You start to see yourself as someone capable of handling emotional intensity without being consumed by it. That kind of self-trust changes the way you carry yourself in every interaction, not just arguments. Maturity also allows you to see beyond the moment. Arguments are often fueled by temporary feelings, but the consequences can be long-lasting. When you lead with maturity, you're protecting your future from the mistakes of the moment. You're preserving the connection. You're preserving your integrity. You're preserving your peace. Emotional reactions can break trust, but mature responses build it. Emotional reactions create distance, but mature responses bridge it. Emotional reactions escalate conflict, but mature responses bring clarity. It matters because it reminds you that your behavior is your legacy in every argument. People may forget the details of the disagreement, but they will always remember how you handled it. Leading with maturity means choosing strength over impulse, clarity over chaos, and long-term respect over short-term reaction. It means stepping into the version of yourself that can handle intensity with intention. And that kind of leadership doesn't just end arguments. It elevates you as a person. When you bring all 5 keynotes together, you become someone who no longer gets swallowed by emotional storms. You pause before reacting so you can see the situation clearly. You regain control over your emotions instead of letting them push you into mistakes. You shift from defending yourself to truly understanding the moment. You de-escalate the tension with your calm leadership, and you respond with maturity instead of impulse. These steps might seem simple, but they transform the way you navigate conflict, protect your relationships, and carry yourself through emotionally charged moments. They make you someone who doesn't get dragged into chaos, someone who leads with clarity, intention, and strength. Arguments don't define your character. How you handle them does. Every pause, every breath, every calm choice builds a version of you that is stronger, wiser, and more grounded than the person you were yesterday. So keep practicing the 3-second rule. Use it as your anchor. Let it guide you back to the kind of person you're proud of being, even when the moment gets loud. Good luck on your journey to becoming emotionally stronger and more intentional with your words. Thank you for trusting this message, and thank you for choosing growth over chaos. Your effort to communicate better is already proof of your strength. You've got this.